Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Basil. In this video, I'm going to discuss the most disappointing books that I read in 2022. I read so many great books in 2022, but some of them didn't work for me. In this list, I'm going to talk about 10 books that I expected something from them, but they disappointed me in one way or another. This doesn't mean that these books are bad, because so many people love them and some of them are literary classics, but they did not work for me personally. Everything I say in this video is my own opinion as a reader. The first book on my list is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. This novel is very famous and very popular with readers, especially that it's the first installment in a series of 3 books. The latest book was released in 2022. However, I really didn't like it. It started really strong, but then my interest started to wane as I progressed with the book because it was so boring for me. The story talks about Beartown, which is a distant village in Sweden, which doesn't have anything to boast about other than its junior hockey team. The star of the team does something very terrible that could endanger the team's chances of success and could destroy the townspeople's hopes and dreams for the team. We follow the team players' lives and their interactions in the town. This novel is about 400 pages long, but it felt so much more than that. It was so repetitive at some parts. I felt that the author is intentionally repeating stuff just to make it longer. The word hockey was mentioned so many times in this novel. I was so sick of it. I was not interested in hockey at all. I read 2 other novels by Frederick Bachman, A Man Called Ove and Anxious People, and I liked them better than this one. I don't think I'm going to continue with the series, but maybe at the distant future I might come back to it. Next book on my list is a very famous classic by Ernest Hemingway, which is The Sun Also Rises. I wanted to like this book, but I couldn't follow what the novel is really about. I felt that the narrative is so shallow or on the surface. It could have been a movie screenplay because there are so few descriptions of the characters, their motivations, their actions, and what's going on in general. Most of it is an empty dialogue between characters, and the dialogue itself was so repetitive at times. It felt like some adjectives were used way too many times, and I felt like there was no plot really. It's just a group of friends after the World War who hang out at coffee shops in Paris and keep whining and are very depressed after the war, and then they go to Spain to watch some bullfighting. I was not really interested in any part of the novel, and I really wanted to like it because Ernest Hemingway is such a big writer. I want to read other books by him. I want to give myself a chance with this author, but maybe at a later time. Next book on my list is called The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. This book was very successful at the time of its release, and it was turned into a Netflix movie. It's a murder mystery book about a woman who is trapped in her house because of a mental condition called agoraphobia, which makes the person who has this condition trapped in his house and afraid to go out. All this woman does is spy on her neighbors all day long and take her prescription drugs and drink way too much. She witnesses a murder in the apartment of her neighbors because she was spying on them, and nobody believes her because the woman that was killed turns out to be alive. I felt like the only pull of this novel is that this is an unreliable narrator. Then I didn't find anything else to lift the novel. I really didn't like the final reveal of the novel. I felt that it was very unbelievable and far-fetched, and I really didn't get the hype behind this novel. Next book on my list is unfortunately another classic, and it's a very famous and important one, and it's Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This book talks about a black man who is in the south of America at a university, and he is expelled from this university, and he travels to New York and tries to find a job. There's almost a consensus of how brilliant and well written this book is, but I really struggled to finish it. It was very long, even though I really love reading big books. It was 600 plus pages, and I really didn't like the main character. I felt him really pretentious most of the time, and I felt that the author is deliberately trying to showcase his English and his breadth of language through really complicated sentences thrown in the prose. and it made the reading experience really unpleasant for me. Of course, the novel talks about very important issues like racism as its main theme and human rights movement. I really wanted to like it, but it didn't work for me. Maybe I will revisit it later in the future. Next book on my list is called The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This novel talks about a man in his 40s who goes back to his childhood home to attend a funeral, and the novel is only a flashback of his memories there. His childhood was not normal at all because he was friends with a girl whose mother and grandmother are kind of witches. I really hated this book. The whole book was too bizarre, too vague, and too unspecific. I really couldn't understand what was happening. Nothing is explained, and some weird stuff happen, and we don't know why they're happening or what's going on half of the time. It was very dull, and I kept zoning out during reading it, and I could not connect with any of the characters. Which brings me to the next book by the same author, which is called American Gods. It has the same issues as The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and I think I will not read any of Neil Gaiman's books anymore. He is not my cup of tea. The book talks about a man called Shadow who is released from prison only to find out that his wife has died in a car crash, and on his way back on the plane he meets another guy called Wednesday who offers him a job to work for him, and from there the book takes very weird, bizarre turns. Then we discover that Wednesday is a god, and throughout the novel we meet so many other gods that the immigrants to the US brought from their homelands. I really liked the concept, but I really hated the execution. First, it was too long unnecessarily, over 600 pages long. I really liked the beginning at the prison, and this guy is being released and he finds out that his wife is dead, and I felt like, wow, this novel could be good. It could be something like a Stephen King novel. I felt that the author was going out of his way to be vague and mysterious on purpose. This guy called Shadow then goes on a journey throughout America. Why? We really don't know. And I actually stopped caring a long time ago because it was a very unpleasant reading experience. Next book on my list is a very famous book. It's called Normal People by Sally Rooney. It's very famous and so many people like it, but I just couldn't connect with it. I couldn't understand what the hype is all about, and I felt bad for that. We follow the lives of two characters from high school to college. Sometimes they are friends hanging out, and sometimes they are lovers. The book format is in episodes. Each chapter is an episode, and then we have time jumps between episodes. It's kind of a romance novel, but it's not at the same time. Their relationship is really complicated and sometimes fascinating, and sometimes I just could not understand it at all. I really didn't like it. I mean, sometimes I can just pinpoint what I don't like, and other times I just can't. Next book on my list is called Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I really loved Octavia Butler's other novel, which is called Kindred. It was a really fascinating book, but this one, her most famous, I really couldn't like it. The book talks about a post-apocalyptic world in which chaos rules. The world is not safe and it's filled with dangerous people. The only safe places are small neighborhoods that are surrounded by walls. One day, this safety is gone when the neighborhood is burned to the ground, and our protagonist flees her neighborhood and tries to go to the north. And she invents a religion called Earthseed, and she's 14 years old. At the beginning of each chapter, we get a verse of this religion's book that was invented by the protagonist. The book could be very good without these verses and without this little girl inventing her own religion. I really couldn't connect with her. I felt her very pretentious. Like if she was older than that, like in her 50s or 60s, I would have liked the book and found it more believable. Trigger warning, there are some really disturbing images in this novel because there's a drug that the bad guys use and it makes them violent and they don't think clearly and they commit brutal things, so beware. Next book on my list is a gigantic book that I can't believe that I finished it. It's called Seveneves. The author is Neil Stephenson. He is a very famous science fiction author, and I didn't read any of his work, but somehow I decided to start with his longest book, which was a mistake. So the story begins with the moon splitting into 7 giant pieces. The reason is not given why it has split. We just deal with the ramifications of this split, which is Earth's destruction. However, the destruction in the novel takes about 2 years to happen, which gives humanity enough time to rescue its top people and send them to the International Space Station, which gets upgraded to contain all these people. And then after Earth is destroyed, some little drama happens in space, and you think the novel ends here. But no. After 600 pages, we get 300 extra pages of part 2 of the book. The story goes on and we move forward 5,000 years to see what humanity has done in space, because Earth is uninhabitable. Of course, the book is filled with detailed scientific explanations of orbital mechanics, robotics, and how to launch people into space. I really didn't mind this information dump, but it was a little bit excessive at some parts. There isn't much of a story in this book because I didn't feel there was any character development for any of the character. There wasn't enough struggle despite the huge size of the novel. We did not get the point of view of the people on Earth, and we didn't get any drama from earthbound people who are going to die. And why did humanity gather all of its resources to launch a few people without showing any resistance? Like, it felt unbelievable. I think the author should have explored this side instead of the huge amount of information in the book. The third section was completely unnecessary, and I felt that it did not add to the novel any value. Instead, it dragged for 300 pages, and it felt like a completely different novel in characters, in tone, in everything, and I didn't like it. I felt it was so boring. Next book on my list is a classic. It's called The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. I read other books by H.G. Wells, and they were not as much boring as this one. So the story is about a guy who is stranded at sea, and he is rescued by a ship which is headed to an uncharted island in the ocean. It turns out that this island is used by Dr. Moreau for animal and human genetic manipulation. He turns animals into humans, and things go very wrong very quickly. Now, I'm sure at the time of its publication, this was a very scary novel, but now it's just outdated. The narration is very boring, and I could not be excited or engaged in the story. The novel addresses really important issues like how ethical is genetic manipulation, even long before genetic manipulation is achieved. I felt like the novel of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is a much better novel discussing the same subject, and I would recommend you to read that book. Thank you so much for watching this far. I hope you liked the video. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and I hope you like my next videos. Thank you so much.